one of the questions that a person should really ask himself is that something in the equation doesn't add up. If I accept the fact that Hashem created the entire world to give to mankind, Hashem put us on this planet to grow, to accomplish. And when I'm done my job here, I'll be in the world to come. Whatever I shape myself into, that's what I'll be for eternity. But I began under the Kisei HaKavod. I began under Hashem's throne of glory, a pure neshama, put into this body for a few short years, given the Torah as the ultimate spiritual guide for perfection. And then, after reaching that level, I spend eternity in the world to come. The question that begs being asked is then, why is it so difficult to serve Hashem? If there's a full half of me that only desires being close to Hashem, that's programmed to do everything good, right, and proper, and I have a Torah directing me, and the entire reason I was created was for this, you'd assume that serving Hashem would be very natural, instinctive, intuitive. We just do it, stay at it, keep at it, and have a very easy time of it. But that doesn't seem to be the reality. It seems to be a bitter fight, a battle. And even if a person does very well, and even if a person reaches stellar heights, it's day after day, fight after fight. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and sometimes you make it, and sometimes you don't. And that's assuming that the person actually really succeeds. Many people don't. Many people, whatever. And the question is, why is it so difficult to serve Hashem? And I believe the reason is because Hashem created what I call three overlays. Three overlays that make it very difficult for us to really grow, accomplish, so that we could have true free will. The first overlay we discussed already is the fact Hashem took me and put me into this body. This body has all the drives, desires, all of the instincts to keep it alive. And the I who think, the I who I'm speaking to, am filtered, thinking, exist within this body that covers me up. One moment I get it, the next moment I don't, because inside this body is all of the drives and desires, and the I whom speaking to am in this sort of semi-drunk state, where I realize I'm going to leave this earth, and I don't. I realize the purpose of creation, and I don't. I recognize I'm standing in front of Hashem right here, and I space out, because I'm in this body sort of semi-drunk, sort of in this unclear state. And I think a mashal that's very, very helpful to clarify this is if you've ever gone snorkeling, you've been to a lot of various places, and you put on that mask and you put on the tube and you look under. It's beautiful, an entire aquatic world, colorful, with live different types of species, different fish, different floral, different amazing, beautiful things to look at. And it's so quiet. And it's so vibrant. It's so alive. It's so real. And then when you're done, you pick your head up, and all of a sudden, whoa. It's a very different experience. Air, I breathe right here. I see much clearer, but it's very different. So which one is real? Which one is the real world? And that is us and the world to come. Right now, I'm submerged. I see things and I don't see things. It's dark. It's difficult to get things. But I'm aware of a totally different world where I see for miles and miles, where I feel things acutely, where I'm able to hear, not through the warbly sound of a thick water that's distorting things, but I'm able to hear and see with absolute clarity. Which one is real? I'm living in two worlds. The goal is to recognize that I'm a Ben Olam Haba, to see that world as real as possible, get it, feel it, touch it, so that I sense it more, so that in this drunken state I awaken a little bit. But no matter what, as long as I'm alive, as long as I'm in this body, there'll be that effect, that heavy cloak of physicality. I get it, I don't get it, semi-drunk, semi-not drunk. And that's what I call the first overlay. And that's the first reason why it's very difficult to serve Hashem, because I never really get it. I never really understand the gravity of my actions. I never really understand the incredible accomplishments of serving Hashem. And I certainly never see myself leaving this existence. And that first overlay certainly will make it difficult, and certainly will make it hard to serve Hashem. But that's not where it ends. There's another entire overlay that has nothing to do necessarily with this balance, but affects things in a very real way. And that second layer is the individual character traits. And that means anger, humility, jealousy, laziness, desire, all of the different traits that are within the human. But you see, each of us starts at a very different point across the gamut of them. So for instance, one person might start with a 30 in terms of anger. Imagine for a minute that one was cool as a cucumber, never got upset, and 100 was a boiling tea kettle, always losing it. If we would use that scale to measure 1 to 100, so one person might start with a 30 in terms of anger. In terms of jealousy, he might be a 20. In terms of arrogance, he might be a 15. In terms of laziness, maybe a 40. In terms of desire, a 12. But you see, each of us have a unique start point, and almost like the keys, teeth on a key, you can see the ups and the downs. Each of us start with a different start point in each of the character traits. And that affects us to a tremendous extent. Because whether it be my anger, my humility, my jealousy, my laziness, my desire, it affects me. Now, the measure of the human being is how far he went with what he was given. Meaning to say, you started at a 30 in anger, and where do you end up? Did you grow? Did you accomplish? Did you get it down to a 20? Did you get it down to a 15, down to a 10? Or the opposite, maybe it's up to a 50? In terms of jealousy, did you become less jealous or more jealous? But no matter what, all of us have a start point, and that affects things in a major way that I don't think we normally think about. And let me share with you what that is. Have you ever gotten angry? And I mean really angry. And you said words. You said things maybe you normally wouldn't have said. And you expressed things in a way that normally you wouldn't. And the next day you wake up and you say to yourself, oh my goodness, why did I do that? How did I speak? I never speak that way to anyone. How did I say those words in that tone to that person? What happened? And you're aghast. You're hugely embarrassed by what you did. Now, here's the question. What happened? I mean, clearly, I opened my mouth yesterday. I said X, Y, and Z. Clearly now, right now, I never would say those words. I never would say it in that way. What happened? So what happened was that anger took over my reality. What happened was that I didn't just get angry. I now saw the world through my filter of red. It now changed the way I feel about things. It changed my worldview. It certainly changed the way I look at you. Because you see, when I get angry, it's not just an emotion of anger. It's now I view things differently. I think differently. I look at you differently. And certainly what I should say to you, you deserve 10 times as much. Not only should I say that, but I should say... And suddenly, it's not just that I'm angry, but my whole worldview has been changed. And I now see the world through that lens of red. And when I see the world through that red lens, the world looks differently. I think differently. My approach is different. The next day, when I wake up and I say, oh my goodness, what did I do? That lens is gone. I'm back to sobriety. I'm back to being regular and sober, and I can't believe, I don't speak the way to any, I just don't do that. What did I do? And if you become a little bit self-aware, you'll see that it's not just that we're in a state of drunkenness in general terms, it's that each of the traits takes over, and when it's operating, when it's right there in front of me, that lens changes the way I think. So if jealousy takes over, I feel vastly differently. The Orchel Tzaddikim explains, when I'm jealous, I can forgive you for nothing. But not just that I can't forgive you. What you did was you took that from me. That position, that honor, that job I was supposed to have. You were not supposed to have that. That's mine, and you stole it from me. You took it from me. That's my position. And as strange as that sounds, and as insane as it sounds, that's how we feel. When I'm jealous of you and what you have, I need. I not just need, it's mine, it should be mine, and it feels like you've taken it from me. And suddenly I view the world in a whole different way. If you've ever said to a lazy man, you really should get up off the couch because the building might burn down, he's not going to say to you, you're right, there is a danger, but what can I do? I'm lazy. He'll give you 50,000 reasons why nothing is going to happen. I won't lose my job. I won't get fined. It's not going to happen. How is it that the lazy man has so many excuses and so many rationales and so many reasons? Because laziness takes over, and now I view the world through that brown filter, and whatever, it doesn't matter, and it won't happen, and it's okay. It doesn't really matter. But you see, each trait as it takes over doesn't just affect me, it changes my worldview, changes my thinking, and changes the very, very way that I value things. Don't read the papers in our day and age. But if you do, you'll find so many things that are so impossible to understand. A man will give up his career, a successful career, for a fling. A happily married person throws it all in the trash, his marriage, his future, for some stupidity. And you read about it all the time. And you have to say to yourself, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Don't you realize you're in the public eye? Don't you realize you're a senator? You're a governor? Everyone is going to know. What are you thinking? And the answer is, he's not thinking. Because you see, when desire takes over, and suddenly the risks are worth it. And it really isn't that dangerous, and it's not going to happen anyway, because it's not just that I desire something, it's that now I think differently, I view things differently, I'll take risks that I never would take in my sober mind, but now I do, because suddenly I feel differently, I look at things differently, and it's almost like I lose control. Someone once complained to the Chofetz Chaim about a rich man. And this person said to the Chofetz Chaim, it's disgusting the way that man acts. He acts like he's so important, he's so arrogant. If I had money, if I were rich, I would never act that way. And the Chofetz Chaim said, you're making a mistake. Chofetz Chaim said, let me give you a mashal. Imagine that two men were walking past a tavern. And out of the tavern door stumbles a drunk. And he starts staggering, and he falls on the ground, and he rolls over in the ground. And one man turns to his friend and says, look at that, this is disgusting. He gets drunk, he rolls on the floor. If I were to get drunk, I would never act that way. I'd keep my dignity. Explains the Chofetz Chaim, do you see, when you're drunk, you don't feel as you do now. When you're drunk, you roll on the floor, and saying that if I were to get drunk, I would never do that is foolish. Because if you were drunk, you'd be drunk. And for you to say, if I were rich, I would never act that way is equally foolish. Because when you're rich, you feel differently. It changes the way you view things and changes the way you view the world. And you will feel very differently if you were rich than if you weren't. And therefore you can't judge that person, because if you were in his state, you'd be drunk as well. And this reality that the various different traits and different things that are going on inside me change my entire worldview, makes me drunk with its own individual flavor, is one of the great difficulties in remaining sober, intelligent, and guarding ourselves from danger. I once had a conversation with a drug addiction counselor, and he told me something very interesting. He said he will not allow any of his clients to go to Manhattan. Now, I assumed the reason being, must be a lot of drugs there, dangerous, whatever. He said, no, not that. They pass the Empire State Building, he said. I said, so what? He said, don't you understand? The Empire State Building, on top, It looks just like a hypodermic needle. It's a trigger. Every time the heroin addicts pass it, it triggers them and they need to use. Now, folks, I could pass that building for 1,000 years and never see a hypodermic needle, but a heroin addict does. And it's not just that a heroin addict sees what I wouldn't see, it triggers him and suddenly he feels differently, looks at things differently, desperately needs to use, even though he doesn't want to. Even though in his heart of heart he knows he may very well kill himself. And he's fighting a fight, fighting a battle not to use it. But once he gets triggered, he's a different human being. And one of the great secrets to working on your midos, to working on these areas, is not to allow yourself to get triggered. Because you see, when I get triggered, what happens is suddenly I feel differently. I feel differently, and I view things differently, and no longer am I in my sober, rational thinking mind. And I'd like to share with you one simple observation. We are all addicts. We're all addicted. One person, it might be taiva, another person might be anger, another person might be laziness, another person might be materialism, another person might be just simply competition for position and honor, maybe worship of self. But we're all addicted. And the only reason why we don't realize it is because we're not held feet to the fire. And let me explain to you what I mean. Many, many a time, I've wished to bring AA to the frum community. Alcoholics Anonymous is a wonderul program. The 12-step program in its original pure form is brilliant. It's actually one of the best Mussar programs I've ever seen. I have 4 copies of the big book at home, and I've read it, I've gone through it, and anytime I speak to someone who's in the program, I'm amazed by the thoroughness, the actual work that they do on themselves. They change, they commit to change, and they grow, and they're honest and self-critical, and they become different human beings. A person going through the program, going through steps, comes out a different person. And for many years, I've dreamt and wished, how could I bring that to the frum world? We could use that. I could grow, I could change, I could accomplish. Okay, I'm not a heroin addict, that's not my issue, but my issue might be, again, it might be jealousy, it might be anger, it might be ego, whatever my issue is, I could use that program. But from the very first time, I realized it'll never work. Why? Because an alcoholic, a heroin addict, has an advantage that you and I don't have. And what's that advantage? It's something called desperation. You see, when you know that if you take another drink, you might very well die, and you know that you can't not take another drink, there's a powerful sense of desperation, of hopelessness. I have to deal with this. I must solve it or I'm going to die. And that desperate sense is what will catapult a person to grow and catapult a person to actually take control of their life and change. But you see, I don't have that luxury. My fierce temper is something that I explain away. My egoism, my self-worship is something that's just, I could explain it. And no matter what my issue is, no matter what my problem is, I'm able to deny the problem. I don't have an anger problem. I got a bunch of employees who are pain in the neck. Jealous? I'm not a jealous person. It just happens to be they have a lot more than me. He does than I do. By the way, I don't know if you realize this, but my brilliance is only exceeded by my humility. You see, I have the ability to rationalize, to whitewash, because no one's holding my feet to the fire. Until you're actually really, really honest with yourself. Until you actually look in that mirror and really stare yourself down and say, wait a minute, I'm really not that in control. I say many things that I wish I didn't say. I do many things that I wish I didn't do. I think many things that I wish I didn't. So what is my problem? And my problem is that I'm a human being. And I have a host of issues that I have to work on. All of us have them. But that's the second level of why it's very difficult to serve Hashem, why it's very difficult to see the world to come and remain with that firmly in front of my eyes, because it's an ever-changing reality that I experience. I may get it at one moment, and I may recognize that if I say words that hurt another human being, it's catastrophic. It's like murder. And I fully get it, and I'm so careful until I lose my temper. And then a person like that, I just say 10 times the words, that person deserves. And suddenly, my whole reality changes. My whole sense of things changes. And obviously, now that I look at things differently, and I feel differently, I'm drunk. I'm triggered. I'm drunk. I'm like that drunken guy falling out of the tavern and saying, if I were to get drunk, I would never act that way. If I were to be wealthy, I wouldn't act that way, is foolish. Because when you're rich, when you're anger, and when you're filled with desire, you feel differently. And understanding that each of us have our areas, and each of us have to work on those areas. And when I get triggered, they take over, and I think differently, I view things differently, makes it doubly difficult. The first problem I have is I can't see the world to come so clearly. I can't recognize the great accomplishments or the opposite because I'm in this heavy cloak of physicality. I'm in this body that blocks me. I'm in an overall sense drunk, blunted, not able to feel. But then there are specific things that well up, that take over my mind, change my thought processes. When I'm filled with desire, I want it, I need it, I have to have it. And it's more valuable at that moment than anything else in the world. And telling me that X, Y, and Z is going to happen doesn't matter. Because right now I want this more than that. I'm a sane human being. How could that be? How could that be? Because I'm a sane human being that Hashem created and put into this situation to allow me to be challenged. By the way, one of the most important things to realize is that I didn't create my issue. And I didn't create my jealousy or my arrogance or my temper. And understanding that Hashem put me into this body with a given temperament, with a certain set of character traits on different levels. My challenge, my job is to work on it, to improve them. But I did not create my temper or my desire or my ego or whatever my issue is. I have to work on it, but understanding that Hashem gave me this as a challenge allows me to deal with it much more rationally. So the first problem is that in an overall sense, we're blunted, we can't feel because I'm in this body and it's a heavy, heavy cloak of physicalities. The second problem is that each individual midah, each trait will take over and blind me and change my sight at that moment. And the sight doesn't always come back with total clarity. And sometimes it leaves residues, and sometimes you keep seeing red for days to come. Sometimes you never see clearly again. But those are the first two areas. There's a third overlay, a third reason why it becomes even more difficult. And to understand that, let me share with you a mushal. Imagine an actor who gets a call from his agent, and it sounds something like this. Listen, Jack, it's a great script, a guaranteed Oscar. I'm sending by the script. I want you to sign on it. We're going to do the deal. Actor reads the script. The next day, his agent calls him. Jack, we're going to do it, right? Nope. Jack, what is it? We'll get more cash for the deal. We're going to do it, guy, right? I'm not doing it. Jack, what's the problem? It's a great script. What's the problem? The problem is the part you have me playing. The guy's a down and out loser. Yeah, but Jack, that's just the part you're going to play. You're going to do it, guy, right? I can't stand the whole world seeing me that way, a luckless idiot. He hangs up the phone. Now, that conversation never happened because any actor, as well as anyone going to the play, understands that the actor has a role to play. He's given a script, a very exact script with very specific stage settings, and he's judged by one criteria. This was your role to play. How well did you play it? If his part to play is an idiot savant and he plays it well, he'll win accolades and win awards. If his part to play is the most successful human being on a planet, but he plays his part poorly, the critics will rip him to shreds. The actor is given a part to play and judged based on one criteria: how well did you play your part? And this, I believe, underscores the third issue that we have to grapple with, and that is that each of us are given a different life setting. For one person, it might be poverty. For another person, it might be wealth. Another person might be robust health. Another person might be sickness, illness. One person may be gifted with intelligence. Another person might be slightly slower than the rest. Some people are gifted in terms of knowing what to say to whom and how, social intelligence, and some people are just klutzes. But you see, you have to recognize that all of those were chosen for me. Hashem took me from under the throne of glory, said, this is a generation into which you shall be born. Into this household, in this particular birth order, put into a body with this given temperament, this given basis of desire, anger, ego. Go out there, ford those streams, live your life, accomplish, become the great person you could be. But you see, it's not just an inner temperament, and it's not just a mix of anger and jealousy and laziness, etc. It's a given stage setting that includes a lot more. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look around and see that people are given very specific life tests. I'll give you a few as just common examples, but they're so numerous it's difficult to count. Let's start with one. I was talking to Rabbi Harris once, and he had a kasha. Rabbi Harris, Rosh now of Forest Hills, he couldn't understand this guy. He couldn't understand it. The guy would learn afternoon Seder, morning Seder, and then at night go to the Beis Zonos, go to a house of prostitution. And Rabbi Harris could not, how could it be? How is it shayach? A guy learns morning Seder, learns afternoon, and then how could it be? He couldn't answer. And I told Rabbi Harris teretz, and Rabbi Harris was moda. I was very proud. I don't know if Rabbi Harris accepted any other answer that I said, certainly not back then. But I'd like to share with you what I said. This young man, who I was sort of an older kind of mentor to, had a different upbringing than the average fella in yeshiva does. He lived out of town, and his 8th grade teacher was a woman, and she took advantage of him. And he came into yeshiva high school with a very, very different set of desires, needs than the average fellow does. And the problem is that it didn't just go away. It didn't just disappear. And he would be racked with desire. He'd sit there in the morning over toast, let's go. He'd put his brain on, and then the image would come into his brain, get out of here. And he'd get back to the toast, the image would come back, cut. And he would fight hour after hour. By sheer, he was exhausted. He'd come back for afternoon, say, let's go. Learning, is into learning, all of a sudden the image comes, get out of here. The image comes back. By 6:30, the guy was exhausted. He was wiped out. He didn't make a decision at 6:30, 8:30 to go where he went. He fought a battle all day long. But you see, this is the point. He did not choose that situation. He didn't wake up and say, it'd be great if I could be racked with desires and unending needs for things. That was his life setting, chosen for him, orchestrated very carefully, because that's what he needed. And that's what will allow him to rise above, to transcend. But it is a difficult life test. I want to share with you another one. A fellow was in 1st, 2nd grade, and his friend invited him to his house to come play Shabbos afternoon. So this fellow from a very fine Torah home went to his friend's house, and his friend also from fellow. In any case, his friend's house, they had a maid who lived in the house, and the maid had a TV. It happens to be that the maid had the TV on, and the maid was not in the room. So this boy and his friend said to him, why don't you come with me? So they went, and he watched a certain TV program, Shabbos. He felt so ripped by guilt. I was Machal Shabbos, I desecrated Shabbos. Obviously, he wasn't Machal Shabbos. That's not, you're not supposed to watch TV, but it's certainly not. He didn't put on the TV. He did nothing critically wrong, and certainly he's a little kid. But he was so racked by guilt, and he felt so inappropriate. How could I do that? I watch TV on Shabbos. I'm obviously not a regular guy. I'm obviously not a frum person. Obviously, I'm not cut out for this. And he began a downward spiral of destroying his self-esteem, and he became a drug addict. But not because he wanted to do drugs, but because there was such an emptiness within him, such a terrible sense of worthlessness, that he needed something to numb the pain. He did not choose at 6 or 7 years of age to be there. And that is a life setting and a very difficult one. But if you look around, you'll see that there are many, many different situations. Some people have anxiety, and some people have depression, some people have OCD. And there are lots and lots of plain old run-of-the-mill life tests. Some people need to make a lot of money. I need to be rich. I need people to know me as a wealthy guy. I need it. And you understand how that plays perfectly on his balance of character traits? Or maybe insecurity, or maybe need for honor. But each person was given a very specific life setting, a very specific role to play that was custom made to allow them to be challenged, but dramatically challenged. And if these sound scary, I'd like to share with you that every other human beings other than my life test is frightening beyond belief. I don't always view them that way, but everyone is. And I'll share with you an example of what I mean. I used to learn with a fellow on the phone weekly. And one week he says to me, Rebbe, next week I can't learn because the governor wanted to have breakfast with me, and I tried to get out of it. I couldn't. I'm sorry, it's the only time I can learn. So the only time I can meet him, so I can't learn next week. Why did the governor want to have breakfast with this fellow? Because the state owed him $62 million, and the governor was trying to beg a little bit of forbearance. Here's the point. He was a regular fellow in my high school shiur, no brighter than anybody else, no particular grand ambition, a regular guy, good guy, fine fellow. He went into business and he succeeded astonishingly, beyond anyone's imagination. We're talking a man who became so wealthy that, again, the state owes him tens of millions of dollars. Wow, what a life setting. If I could have that, it'd be gewaldig, it'd be wonderful, it'd be great. Until you see what it's like. Until you see that anywhere he goes, he knows that everyone's looking at him and trying to get a piece of his money. Until he knows that he can buy and sell the world. And would you like to know what a life test is? When you wake up in the morning and you know that you're so rich you can buy the city. There's a sense of power, a sense of independence. I don't need anyone. I don't need my wife. I don't need my kids. I don't need God. I could buy the world. It happens to be that this fellow is beautifully pure, and he happens to be winning that life test to a dramatic extent. But I'd like to share with you that if you or I were given that life test, I doubt we'd pass it. I have seen many, many people with the kind of life circumstances that you would say, wow, what could be better than that? But when you really understand what's going on, you realize that, oh my goodness, I don't want that, because I don't think I could withstand anything close to that. And at a certain point you realize that Hashem handcrafts custom designs an exact life setting for me, and based on my strengths and my weaknesses, based on my balance of all my various character traits. And this is the ideal challenge. A challenge it will be, a very difficult challenge, but one that I can win. But if I were given your challenge, forget about it. And the converse, if you were given mine, also forget about it. Because as difficult as this life challenge is, it was handcrafted by my Creator, who knows my inner nature, knows exactly my strengths and weaknesses, and custom made this exact life setting to allow me to shine and to allow me to be greatly challenged right to the core of my essence, but still have enough steam, enough energy to actually win. But you have to recognize that this thing called free will is not as simple as we wished it were. It has to be equally possible for a person to reach the heights as for a person to hit the bottom. And to afford that, what Hashem did was, number one, put us into this body in his drunken state. I get it, I don't get it, I understand, I don't understand. I'm talking to Hashem right here, and then I'm gone. And I wake up 3 minutes later when I take 3 steps back at the end of Shemona Esrei. How did I get here? The first overlay is the fact that I'm in a body. In this body, I'm deeply submerged. I go under the sea, and it looks so real, and this is life. I also know there's something else, there's a world to come, but I don't really feel it. It's sort of distant. It's sort of like hard to really feel. And because, again, the body has its toll, the heavy cloak of physicality. And the second overlay is the individual character traits. And when I get angry, it changes my worldview. When I'm lazy, thick, heavy, I don't want to move. I don't want to do that. I'm not interested. It doesn't mean a thing to me. It just doesn't matter. And when desire flashes in front of me, all of a sudden what I value greatly changes. All of a sudden I'll do things I don't want to do normally, but I feel differently. And again, as the Chavetz Chaim said, like a person who gets drunk. When a person has extreme wealth, there's a sense of drunkenness. And don't say, if I had money, I would never act that way. That's like saying, if I got drunk, I wouldn't roll on the floor. Well, if you got drunk, you'd feel differently. And understanding that each of the traits affects us in a different way, but affects all of us. And understanding that each of us begin at different start points. Again, it might be a 30 in this trait, it might be a 20 in that. And the measure of the human being is how far you went with it. But regardless, it's going to flash, it's going to affect you. And recognizing that you have to treat it like a trigger for any other issue. If you're a heroin addict, you don't pass the Empire State Building because it triggers you and changes your mind view. Whatever your particular weakness is, you have to work on it and recognize that if you get triggered, you're going to feel differently. But that's the second overlay that makes it difficult for us to keep on track and difficult for us to continue growing. But the third overlay is my entire life setting. And my entire life setting means my talents, my abilities, the particular life that I lead right now, including family of origin, including the person you marry, including their strengths and weaknesses, and including many events that transpire during your life to shape you, mold you into what you are now to be perfectly challenged to grow and accomplish. The challenge is to overcome it. You're not judged based on your life circumstances. As we all understand that how much money I had here isn't going to mean anything in the world to come, and so too, my start point in terms of my character traits, in terms of my life situation, isn't relevant. What's relevant is what I do with it, how far I go, what I accomplish with it. But at the end of the day, it becomes very, very difficult. And if you'd like to know why it's so difficult to serve Hashem, as Mesilas Yesharim explains, we're put in a raging battle. Because all the things of life, desire and need, coupled with the fact that there's poverty and there's wealth, there's illness, there's health, and all of these things are layer after layer that makes it very easy to lose our way. Why does Hashem make it so hard? Exactly for that reason, because now I actually have free will. Now if I choose, if I actually transcend and really reach the heights, it's my choice. I made myself, I'm credited with creating who I am for eternity. But real free choice has to be really free choice. And it's got to be equally easy for you to hit the bottom as it is to go to the stars. And I want to close this session with one last thought. There's Rabbeinu Bachai in Dvarim who quotes a medrash that is so eye-opening. He explains that before being created, Kol HaNivroim, every single creation, were created becheftzam uritzonam, willingly with their desire. And he explains the medrash that HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes each neshama and each creation before they're born, and Hashem shows them what is going to be. Before I was put into this life, before I was put into this body, before I was put into this world, Hashem showed me exactly what my life was going to look like. Showed them all of their asidim, all of the mikraim, all of the events that were going to happen to them. every one of those strange things that happened to me, and I really wouldn't have written the script that way if I were writing the script. But clearly someone wrote the script. And before I was put into this world, Hashem showed me every one of those events. And not only that, Hashem told me how long I will live. Hashem showed me how I will die. Hashem showed me how I'll earn my living. Will it be berevach? Will it be with abundance? Or the opposite? But not just that. Will it be on my own? Will I be dependent on others? Exactly my life, the sequence, the events, the circumstances were shown to me. And then the words, v'chulam, all of them, rotzu v'kiblu. And before Hashem put any neshama into this world, any neshama had to say the words, yes, I want it. How would you say that? My life now? How could I have said yes to this? And the answer is, now I don't see it. Now I'm blind and I don't recognize this grand opportunity of my life. But there under Hashem's throne of glory, without blinders, without a body that blocked me from seeing, without physicality that stopped me from getting it, I recognize exactly what I need, and I see the life that was shown to me and say, yes, that's it, perfect. That is exactly the challenge that fits me, that suits me, that will allow me to reach great heights, or the opposite. But rotzu v'kiblu, every single person, before being put into this life, said, yes, I want it, I desire it, it's perfect for me. Understanding that allows me to look at my life circumstances, allows me to look at my unique mix of strengths and weaknesses, allows me to look at my life as it is now and say, okay, I get it. I'm not judged based on my life now. I'm judged based on what I do with it, what I accomplish. At the end of the day, how far I went, and how much I did is the judge. But understanding that it is difficult and it is a challenge. Number one, I never really get it fully. Number two, I have a bunch of different traits that sort of mix in and get me drunk. And number three, I have a very specific life's challenge. That's why it's difficult. But again, one time I saw it, and even now I could understand it, that this is perfect for me, will allow me to reach the heights I can become, and will allow me for eternity to be the great person I was destined to be.